Hi, I'm Micah Halpern. Thank you for joining me today as I do some thinking out loud. Our first segment is called Background Briefing. The first thing I've been thinking about is the Olympics. For the Western world, almost everything involving China is complicated, problematic, political. So, to ask a rhetorical question, why would the 2022 Olympic Winter Games be any different? They're in China. The United States chose to boycott the Winter Games, citing China's abysmal human rights record. But did the United States really boycott the Games? The United States called it a diplomatic boycott, and several other nations actually joined their bandwagon. It's a charade that China sees through and that China is very much enjoying. As defined by the United States, this diplomatic boycott means that while U.S. athletes will be competing, U.S. diplomats that normally attend the Olympic Games would not be in attendance. So why is China laughing? Because according to the Chinese, the United States might have said that they are not sending diplomats, but China was asked to issue a great number of diplomatic credentials. Oh, said the United States, those diplomats are there only to protect our athletes. It's okay, you can laugh too. Remember, it's all about diplomacy. And now, we are a bit smarter. Now we all know that diplomats are part of the Olympics. It makes sense. Diplomats are always, playing their own kind of games. Relative to Summer Olympic Games, the Winter Olympic Games have been lackluster events in general. The International Olympic Committee understands this issue and is distressed over the discrepancy between viewer and commercial interests in the Games, winter and summer. They've been trying to address this issue since 1994. Maybe if people knew the history of the Olympic Games, they might be more drawn to the Winter Olympics. The story of the Olympic Games probably begins in 776 before the Common Era, BCE. The name of the Games, Olympic, is actually derived from Olympia, a location. Olympia is where the temple of the Greek god Zeus was located. It is where the city-states came to pay tribute and to honor Zeus. Parenthetically, the idea of an Olympics is as pagan can be, and is why in 1932 Zionist ideologues created a Jewish Olympics, a Jewish sports competition called the Maccabiah, when 18 countries, 1932, 18 countries, and around 400 proud Jewish athletes came to Tel Aviv to participate in the Games. Athletes from pre-state Israel, however, did not have to be Jewish to participate in the Maccabiah. Again, now we are a little bit smarter. The modern International Olympics began in 1896 in Athens with 14 countries, 241 athletes, and 43 events. It was decided that the Games would take place every 4 years, and they would take place in the summer. In 1908, the Games included skating. In 1920, there was ice skating and hockey, but maintaining the ice was impossible, and so a decision was made to have Games in the winter as well. The first Olympic Winter Games took place in 1924. Unlike today's Games, it was also decided that the same country would host both the Winter and Summer Games, and to host them both in the very same year. That tradition continued until 1994, a date we just mentioned, when another decision was made. The Winter Games would take place 2 years after the Summer Games. In other words, 2 years. And they would be hosted in different countries. Olympic Games, both winter and summer, are as much about athletics as they are about business. Hosts of the Games invest huge amounts of money in the hope of making much more money and in generating good public relations and tourism for their country. For example, Summer Games that were held, let's say, in China in 2008 cost the Chinese government $44 billion in infrastructure to create the necessary sports programs. In 2014 in Russia, they spent $51 billion in Sochi. Both China and Russia hoped that the Games would help improve their image. Adolf Hitler had the same idea for the Games in 1936 in Berlin. In 1932, the Summer Olympics were in Los Angeles. Hitler wanted to prove that he was superior to the United States, so he built a huge Colosseum in Berlin, so huge that it could seat 100,000 people. The 36 Olympics in Berlin was the first televised Olympic Games. It was also broadcast by radio to 41 countries. The Nazis commissioned Leni Riefenstahl to film the Games. The movie was called The Olympia and was, of course, a Nazi propaganda film. But the style and techniques that Leni Riefenstahl pioneered were so sensational that her film is the foundation for filming sporting events until this very day. Fast forward to today, China is hoping to use these Winter Olympic Games to break down the country's negative image. They have set themselves a difficult bar. It's a hard task. Western broadcasters and viewers are all too aware of China's record of human rights abuses. No one can be fooled. While China may want to put their best diplomatic foot forward, the Chinese do not intend to change their human rights policies. They just want the good public relations. They just want to look better. COVID doesn't help either. Photos emanating from the games of sterile and sterilized surroundings. In the end, those who watch the games will be amazed, mesmerized by the athletic prowess on display in these games, as in every Olympic Games. And in the end, China will be China, and no one's impression of the People's Republic of China will be changed. I've also been thinking about ISIS, the ISIS leader and terrorist Abu Ibrahim al-Hashimi al-Qurayshi, who blew himself up and his family up as U.S. commandos encircled his home. ISIS has been on the rise these past few months. They are gaining steam and they are reestablishing their hold. They are reasserting their presence. They are making gains in Syria, Iraq, Yemen, and in many parts of Africa. It was not too very long ago when ISIS had control over 38,000 miles, square miles, 12 million people under their realm. They had $1 billion in their treasury. ISIS remembers those good old days, and they want them back now. Targeting al-Qurayshi was an important move in stemming the tide of future ISIS growth. Striking the leadership of ISIS is neither a political issue nor is it a partisan one. Every American and every world leader can sleep a little better knowing that Abu Ibrahim al-Hashimi al-Qurayshi is dead. We are safer today because al-Qurayshi took his own life. It should be clear that targeting a leader of ISIS, regardless, was legal and a justifiable act. Under international law, targeting all ISIS leadership is legal. The United States forces can attempt to capture terrorists like al-Qurayshi, or if that fails, if it is not possible, they can kill the terrorists in the process of capturing them. Fact, period, end. That's it. There's no debate on it. It is the case with al-Qurayshi, just as it was the case in October 2019 with al-Baghdadi. The latter also blew himself up. He blew himself up rather than be captured, just like this one. Blowing yourself up seems to be the defense mechanism of choice for ISIS leaders when captured or surrounded by the U.S. Taking a page from Israel, the United States removed the element of surprise when they came for the ISIS leader. Because there were so many civilians and non-combatants in the area, the United States used helicopters to land commandos and then used loudspeakers to warn non-combatants in Arabic to evacuate. The helicopters appeared to be Black Hawk helicopters. The mission was very much in the style of Israel. Israel regularly warns non-combatants, aka civilians, to evacuate because the warning that the bad guys were also warned when you do this. And as a result, a 2-hour gunfight ensued with the United States. The other terrorists from other groups also came to help ISIS against the U.S. commandos. Despite the support of his compatriot terrorists in arms, there was no way out for Qurayshi. So he detonated the proverbial button and blew himself up and his family. No doubt alive and interrogated, then tried and convicted, it would have been a bigger win for the United States and the West. But victory is victory, and this is still a big victory. This raid against al-Qurayshi is not an act of vengeance by the United States. Repeat, not an act of vengeance. It is not an act of retaliation for recent U.S. prison breaks. It was not a retaliation against terror attacks. It had to be done. Searching and targeting ISIS terrorist leadership is self-defense. And self-defense is what makes the targeting of ISIS ethically permissible and legal by international law. You see, bin Laden, al-Baghdadi, and Qurayshi, each and every one of these men were planning to execute future attacks against the United States and Western allies. As President Biden rightly said, the goal here was to remove Abdullah from the battlefield. And that is a legitimate act of self-defense. There's no question about it. Terrorists are real threats to the lives of U.S. citizens and military, as well as Western allies. How much more so are their leaders? The ideology they embrace and the activities they pursue center around our destruction. So President Joe Biden appropriately explained the situation. He said, "The operation is a testament to America's reach and capability to take our terrorist threats, no matter where they try to hide, anywhere in the world. I am determined to protect the American people from terrorist threats, and I'll take decisive action to protect this country," he said, adding that the United States will, and I'm quoting, "continue working with our close allies and partners, the Syrian Democratic Forces, the Iraqi security forces, including the Kurdish Peshmerga, and more," unquote. Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett was watching carefully. He responded immediately saying, quote, "The world is a safer place now that the leader of ISIS has been eliminated. I commend our great ally, the United States, and the brave American soldiers for executing this daring operation. We must continue the global fight against terror with strength and determination," unquote. The United States and the West cannot be complacent, must not be complacent. There are many who are chomping at the bit and plotting our downfall. ISIS, Iran, Russia, China, all want the United States to fall. Only their weapons differentiate our enemies. But some use politics, some use terror, some use both. It does not matter who is president. The role of the President of the United States is first and foremost to work to protect the citizens of the United States. The next threat is out there. Coming up next, Points of View. First up is a column from the New York Post. It was written by John Podhoretz and was published February 1st, 2022. It's entitled, "Drop the Goldberg Name You Co-opted, Whoopi. You Don't Deserve It." Podhoretz writes an insightful and exceptional piece. He clearly explains Whoopi Goldberg's choice to call herself Goldberg and not some waspy name. Here's how Podhoretz begins. Decades ago, when the performer Karen Johnson decided her name wasn't interesting enough and dubbed herself Whoopi Goldberg instead, it wasn't because Goldberg signified whiteness. Through the years, she's offered many weird and contradictory explanations for her change in moniker, but it might have seemed at the time that a black person sporting the surname Goldberg would be especially eye-catching and noteworthy, especially in conjunction with that wild first name, because it would represent the proud ownership of her outsider status. She wasn't trying to blend in. She was doubling down on race. Note, please, that Karen Johnson didn't become Whoopi Rockefeller. No, she knew that at becoming Whoopi Goldberg, she would be choosing to flaunt in every way possible the fact that she was a minority person in a majority white country. The Goldberg was the cherry on top. You see, in the early 1980s, when Johnson became Goldberg, it was still commonly understood that Jews were a people apart. We were apart due to the facts of history, due to discrimination and hatred based on our very being, and for those who practiced the faith rigorously, due to the way we ate, dressed, celebrated the Sabbath, and prayed. And we were apart because we were the only people in history to be targeted for mass extermination by one of the most powerful countries in the history of the earth. Something that had happened in the living memory of half the people on the planet at the time. Podhoretz is 100% correct. The use of the Jewish name was a play on acceptance. Yes, she was black. Now look at the black lady comedian with the Jewish name. It was a deliberate way to shock her audiences. She knew it and wanted it. She wanted it that way, even in her act. She used to ask all the time, "Do I look Jewish?" Podhoretz actually continues, "Back when Johnson became Goldberg, Jews weren't considered white exactly, and they weren't not white either. The point here is that such a classification system is meaningless when it comes to Jews, no matter the color of their skin." In conclusion, Podhoretz writes, "But it's 2 generations since then. It's obvious that a 2022 version of young Karen Johnson would not choose the name Goldberg to gain that extra frisson of non-white pride. In fact, Whoopi Goldberg should drop the Goldberg now. There are dozens of survivors of the Holocaust who bear the name, and an untold number who died in the Shoah with it. Karen Johnson stains them both. Podhoretz is correct. Just drop Goldberg. She doesn't deserve the great legacy that comes with the name Goldberg. I don't have to explain to anyone watching this network that the Nazis saw themselves as the master race. The Jews were the inferior contaminators of Germany and the world. To the Nazis, it was all about race and the difference between Jews and Aryans. Actually, the Jews and everyone, the difference between Jews and everyone. Jews needed to be exterminated because in the eyes of the Nazis, they were vermin, they were subhuman. This is the most common Holocaust theme developed in the media, in literature, and at rallies of the Nazis. It was all about race. Not to know and acknowledge all of this is to be willfully ignorant. Next up is a column by Ram Ben Ishai. It was published in Ynet February 3rd, 2022, and it's entitled IS, or Islamic State Chief, Arrogantly Unmasked His Identity, Leading to the United States Raid. Subtitled, Analysis, Islamic State Fighters conducted a 2-week battle to free brethren at al-Hashimi jail, ignored communication security procedures that led to identity of Abu Ibrahim al-Qurayshi being revealed. And the subtitle is the spoiler. The entire column explains just that the master terrorist ignored communication safety protocols, and the U.S. found him and targeted him. This is how Ben Ishai begins. The overnight raid, the U.S. forces that resulted in the death of ISIS leader Ibrahim, was made possible because of his involvement in the raid by forces of the Islamic State on the Kurdish-run prison, some 25 kilometers or 15 miles away from his place of residence. This is a short column, an analysis piece by Ishai. He said what he wanted to say, explained and what was needed to explain, and now he actually concludes by saying the following. It seems some of the fighters who were exhilarated by their apparent success revealed their leader's location and enabled the American forces to pinpoint the exact building where he was living with his family near the border with Turkey. The terrorists, I must say, were simply careless. Coming up, commentary through cartoons where pictures tell the story. I'm going to show you 4 memes today. Many have to do with diet and exercise. The pandemic has put a crimp in many people's normal activity. People stay at home. It's safer to stay at home. That's why they stay at home. And they don't exercise. First up is a meme. Reads, I started to go to the gym this morning and I couldn't find my membership. A new one is $10. A donut and coffee were $3. Guess who saved $7? Next is another meme about the crazy state of our education. The meme reads, someday us old folks will use cursive writing as a secret code. Yes, kids today are never taught cursive writing. What we used to call script, we used to learn in 3rd grade. It just amazes me. This next meme is a perfect play on one of the most famous jokes in the history of the world. And, of course, Amazon delivery services. The meme reads, I just ordered a chicken and an egg on Amazon. I'll let you know. This 4th and final meme says, I burnt 2,000 calories today. That's the last time I leave the brownies in the oven while I take a nap. In a moment, more of my own perspective and a few predictions. Move over Omicron. COVID-19 has a new variant. The variant is a spin-off. It occurs when the virus mutates and a new version of it appears. This new variant is not so different from its predecessor, the old Omicron. It's called Omicron, which was called Omicron BA1. This one is called BA.2, and it has ripped through Denmark and has been found in 49 other countries, including the United States. Scientists are still studying the variant. According to early studies, BA.2 is 39% more transmissible than BA.1. But one study shows that unlike BA.1, BA.2 is not transmissible if you are vaccinated. This new variant proves that the COVID-19 virus will continue to adapt as it weakens, and to use the scientific term, that's attenuates. In other words, the virus gets weaker but continues to be viable, meaning alive. The virus does not die, it changes. Israel will be protected by a laser wall of security within the next few months. Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett stated, and this is a quote, within about a year, The IDF will implement a laser-based interception system. Bennett made his comments while addressing the annual conference of the Institute for National Security Studies. He said that the laser security system, quote, will be implemented in the South first and later elsewhere, unquote. He noted, the system will allow Israel to be surrounded by a laser wall that will protect it from missiles, rockets, UAVs, that's unmanned aerial vehicles, and other threats. If we can intercept a missile or rocket with an electric pulse that costs only a few dollars, we will, by all accounts, neutralize the ring of fire Iran has set up around our borders. The laser system will make Israel safer, and compared to the huge expense of the Iron Dome, the cost will be mere pennies. Israeli Defense Minister Benny Gantz announced that he offered aid to the Lebanese army. Lebanon is confronting terrible economic and political crisis. There's no doubt about that. This is what Gantz said, quote, unfortunately, Lebanon has become an island of instability, and the citizens of Lebanon are not our enemies. So this year, I have offered aid to Lebanon 4 times, including last week, through a commander of UNIFIL. We seek to provide focused aid to the Lebanese army, which is suffering from a shortage of basic supplies and has lost more than 5,000 troops that left it recently, while Hezbollah is growing in strength under Iran's auspices. We've turned to the Abraham Accords from a declaration of intent into a reality of economic and security cooperation. These actions strengthen the stability of the region and create a moderate front, which includes countries which the agreements with have yet to mature. This year, we will have ample opportunities to strengthen these bonds and Israel's security interests. The same goes for European states that help us immensely with our efforts to block Iran, and for other Gulf countries, and for Turkey. Assessing the situation soberly in accordance with our common interests, and while maintaining and strengthening our deep and important alliance with Greece and Cyprus. Gantz means well, there's no question about it. Thus far, Lebanon has not responded to Israel's gesture, and they probably never will. Hezbollah, which is sponsored by Iran, is a mutual threat to both Lebanon and Israel. This is a perfect example of Machiavelli's rule. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. With time, hopefully, Lebanon will realize that Hezbollah and Iran are not interested in coexistence, while Israel is ready and willing and able to do just that. A huge uproar has been brewing about a new book on Anne Frank. This new book asserts that the Frank family's hiding place was given up to the Nazis by a Jewish notary. The European Jewish Congress, the EJC, which represents 42 Jewish communities in countries of Europe, has asked the publisher to pull the book title, and it's called The Betrayal of Anne Frank, a Cold Case Investigation. According to the EJC, the book damages the reputation of Anne Frank and will cause even more Jew hatred. Several scholars have said the conclusions drawn by this work are dubious. Moshe Cantor, the EJC president, sent a note to HarperCollins, the book's publisher. In his note, Cantor explained that the book poses a potential incendiary claim at a time when anti-Semitism and the denial and distortion of the Holocaust are on the rise. Cantor continued, in our view, the publication has deeply hurt the memory of Anne Frank, as well as the dignity of the survivors and the victims of the Holocaust. The thing about history is that eventually the truth comes out. Mistakes are common when retelling and writing history. Some are larger mistakes and some are smaller mistakes. It is my belief that we should let historians and analysts argue it out. It's never good to be on the side of censorship, ever. This is not the first controversy to swirl around the history and legacy of Anne Frank. Not too long ago, if you remember, it was discovered that Anne Frank's father insisted on removing the sections detailing sexual questions that the young Anne wrote about in her diary. They were edited out of the first printing, and hence out. It caused a serious stir and led to claims, by the way, that the entire diary was fake. And then the truth came out, and it should come out. As protective of his daughter as he was trying to be, Anne's father should never have had those passages removed. Young people ask questions in their diaries. They did during Anne Frank's youth also, as they do today. The Palestinian Central Council is a decision-making body of the PLO. It's composed of 141 people, and it has not met since 2018. The council has called for a 2-day meeting and set plans for what appears to be the succession of the 86-year-old Palestinian president Mahmoud Abbas. Abbas was last elected PA president in 2005 and has not been elected since. He has a heart problem. He has suffered other health issues also. Succession is on everyone's mind. Everyone. According to information we have, the 2 people who will be taking new positions as replacements for Abbas are Hussein al-Sheikh, who's 61, will become Secretary General of the PLO's Executive Committee, and Rawi Fatou, 73, became the head of the PLO's National Council. Both men are insiders. They are both trusted advisors to Abbas. Neither of them symbolize change or deviation in the way from Abbas. And the style and objectives are almost exactly the same. Nonetheless, this seems to be a step in the right direction. But the transition may not be as smooth and as uncomplicated as the Palestinian Central Council hopes for. There are many people within the Palestinian Authority who are laying claim to the mantle of leadership. And when Abbas can no longer lead, I predict serious tension, even violence, in terms of leadership and the struggle for leadership. Kuwait banned the showing of the Hollywood remake of Agatha Christie's great murder mystery, Death on the Nile. Why the ban? It's about politics. It's not production or creativity, because Israel's actress Gal Gadot stars in the movie. Kuwait also banned the blockbuster Wonder Woman, in which Gadot also starred. Unlike many of Kuwait's neighboring countries, Kuwait does not believe in normalizing relations with Israel. The government's official terminology when referring to Gal Gadot is former soldier in the Zionist occupying army. FYI, Gadot was a fitness instructor in the IDF. Unlike the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain, who signed agreements with Israel and are normalizing relations, Kuwait is still very cold, and they're in a very old school when it comes to this. There are many people in the Arab world who see this movie and the classic Cleopatra, which starred Elizabeth Taylor, as violations of their heritage and history. The movies take place on their land and they do not want Israeli or Westerners treading literally on their history.
On your knees.
We've been thinking out loud about a lot today. Now that you know what I've been thinking, let me know what you're thinking. Email me at micah@jbstv.org. Tweet me at Micah Halpern. Tell me what you think. Before we end, let me leave you with one piquante piece of information. We've been speaking a lot about the Holocaust and racism. I want to approach it differently from other people and from other educators. I want to talk instead about Judaism, and Judaism is about legacy, a greatness to its past and a greatness to its future. Legacy. I can think of 5 words in classical Hebrew for legacy. That tells you something. The number of synonyms tells you how important legacy is to Judaism. If I search, I would find more. There's Moreshet, Nachala, Yerusha, Yizavun, Morasha, and more. There are many things that the enemies of Israel and the enemies of the Jews despise. The most dramatic and the most troubling element for them is the great legacy of the Jewish people. That is what they so troubled the Nazis. No society was ever able to destroy the Jews, and they, the Nazis, thought that they would be the ones. It was to be the crown, the jewel in their crown, the greatest of Hitler's triumphs, destroying the Jews. And all those who tried failed, Hitler among them. The legacy of the Jewish people is not just our past, it's also our future. It will be a great future, and I, for one, can't wait to know what the greatness awaits us. Thank you for thinking out loud with me, Micah Halpern. Let's think out loud again next week on JBS.